What's up everybody, it's Flynn here and welcome to another Nameless Co video. Now I know in the last 135 video I mentioned that I was going to be getting a new red sports car, and in today's video I'm going to be introducing my 1983 Porsche 944. About 2 months ago, I purchased my 1983 944 for about $3,000. Now, 944s go anywhere from $100 all the way up to $20,000, and with the way the market is today, we're seeing turbos go for close to $60,000 on Bring a Trailer, and I'm almost correct that that was the last one that sold. The most expensive 944 I think ever sold was I think in that $60,000 to $100,000 range. Now I picked mine up, like I said, for $3,000. It was not running. It had been sitting for about a year and a half or so, and it had a lot of things wrong with it. And I took the chance like most 944 owners did, and I was like, well, you know, how much could be wrong? And as you guys are seeing right now on the screen, this is kind of what the car looked like in its old form or old state before I cleaned it up and made it nice. Now in a second I'm going to turn this thing on so you guys can hear it, but one of the key selling points to why I bought this 944 over other 944s was that the motor only has 90,000 miles on it. Now most 944s do have broken odometers, so I didn't really care. All that mattered was that the motor was good and that the car ran well. Now like I said, it wasn't running, but because of that number on the mileage of the motor, I was like, all right, it's going to be a good candidate for what I want to do with this car. When I purchased the 944, it came with a completely dead battery, so that was the number one thing I had to do to get this thing running. But at the time, I was kind of involved in a lot of Delica projects and my 135 as well, so I didn't really have the time to designate to getting this thing running on my own. Now I know a 944 is pretty much the easiest Porsche to work on, and I just sent it away to a shop to have them get it done and pretty much do the bare minimum to get it running reliable. Now what it took to get it running reliable, to not have it bog and to not have it die, was the new MAF sensor. Now I know it's not called a MAF, I think the nickname is a barn door for the Bosch units on these cars. It took that. It took some cleaning of the fuse boards, some rewiring of some minor things, and then a new IAC. Now I know it's not called an IAC, but it does the same thing as a idle air control valve, and just some other little things here and there. Currently the water pump is leaking. Now I know the water pump service interval on these cars is about 2 years, so that's something that I have on the way right now, is an ECS timing belt and water pump kit, which will be getting done to this car. Now I know for the total amount of money that I'm into this car, which is around $6K, I could have gotten a lot cleaner one. However, because it is an 83 and it doesn't come with power steering, that was kind of a big selling point to me after I already bought it. So at the time I didn't know that 83s didn't have power steering and that they're manual racks, but because I eventually want to safari this car, which is where I'm getting at, I don't feel as bad doing it to this because it isn't as clean and it's saving one more 944 from the junkyard, which most 944s end up at because Porsche made so many of them. And other than that, it's a rust-free car. It came from California. It's basically, I mean, it was bought in Beverly Hills, and there's a bunch of old service records, and I actually ended up calling one of the original owners who had posted this car about 15 years ago on Craigslist, and I found the old Craigslist ad and I called his number and he picked up, and I ended up talking to him for about 30 minutes about this car, and it made his day, it made my day. And it's cool to just know that something like this, you know, just a piece of metal, can bring back memories for people well over 15 years ago that had already owned this car prior to me. So those are just some of the mechanical things wrong with this car and kind of what it took to get running. But now let's get into some plans on what I'm going to be doing to the car in the future. Coming inside of the interior on my 83 944, as you guys can see, it's an early model, as you know, because it's an 83. Now my dash is pretty cracked. That's kind of one of the biggest things I noticed when I first bought the car. And obviously we have this tear in the seat right here. Probably gonna get this re-stitched up, but when I do safari the build, it is gonna have seat covers on it, because as you guys can see right here, this vinyl or leather is starting to crack and peel, which could get a lot worse whether it gets cold or hot, and the like fluctuation of temperature difference can really affect it when you're sitting in the car. Now the driver's side window does not work, but the passenger window does work. Other than that, I mean, it's a pretty clean interior. There's not really too much that's messed up about it. I did drive the car home from the shop, which is kind of the only time I was able to drive it home, and it drove really well. It pulled very hard, it shifted well. Now my brake calipers are dragging, so the starts and stops were a bit annoying, but other than that, it drove really well. The shifter feels great. I mean, I'd never driven a car that knows which gear it wants to go into before you actually shift it. And if you guys haven't driven a 944 before, it feels like when you're going from second to third or third to fourth, you barely have to give it any pull to get it to go into gear. And it honestly is kind of one of the craziest shifters I've ever felt. So that was like a pretty cool feeling for the first time when I drove this car. That's gonna be a wrap for today's video. Now, some of the plans I'm gonna be doing for this car, I'm not gonna give you guys all the clues, but like I mentioned, it is gonna be a safari build. So that means it's gonna be lifted, it's gonna have bigger tires on it, some mud flaps. But I am gonna tell you guys one thing that I have never seen on any 944, which is gonna be a snorkel. Now, if you guys know, the intake is right around here. So what our plans are is gonna be cutting the hood right here, and then routing some sort of snorkel. I haven't figured out quite yet how I want to do it, but that's going to be it. Now, where Zev and I are moving, this car is going to be right at home with all the rallying that you can do in the area that we're moving to. And because it's not that clean, I figured it's going to be a perfect candidate for a 944. This car is going to be a one-of-one rally build. Now, when I say that, I really mean it, because I'm going to be sending this off to a guy in Turlock, California. I'm not going to drop his name, but he does have a 944 as well, and he's always wanted to do some crazy safari build. And when I met him through actually a viewer on the channel named Mike, he introduced me to him, and he said, guys, you got to work together on this project. And I figured, why not send it to a guy who already has a 944 that's pretty built, and he's gonna do some crazy stuff to it and some crazy modifications that are really gonna make this car stand out from all the other just Porsche safaris in general. Now, that's gonna be a wrap for today's video. Thank you guys for watching. I know it wasn't crazy and we didn't get any driving clips, but we figured let's introduce the car before things really start to turn up a level on Nameless Co with this 944.